Hello, my name is Father Gregory Pine, and I'm a Dominican friar of the province of St. Joseph. I teach at the Dominican House of Studies, and I work as an assistant director for the Thomistic Institute, and this is Pints with Aquinas. In this episode, I'd like to talk a little bit about Christian conversion, specifically in this season of Christmas, and how the Lord's coming at Christmas represents an opportunity for us to deepen in that conversion. And I was thinking about it because it helps us to wend our way between, on the one hand, a kind of fantastical thinking, and on the other hand, a kind of fatalistic or deterministic type of thinking. That is to say, we can genuinely embrace our freedom, or we can genuinely act in and through our freedom, so as to meet the Lord who comes with particular blessings in this Christmas time. So let's think about it together. Here we go. Okay, so I think that there are two main temptations when it comes to our ongoing conversion. On the one hand, there's a temptation to foreclose on the possibility of conversion. This would be what I refer to as like fatalistic or deterministic thinking. It's like, yeah, I was super zealous at the outset, but here we are 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years later, and I haven't observed much in the way of change. It just seems like I'm destined to live out my Christian life in somewhat mediocre fashion. I've accustomed myself either to habitual sin, or to a middling display of virtue, or to an utterly vacuous life of prayer and sacramental reception. And I guess that's what we're doing here. So I don't want to get my hopes up. I don't really want to open myself to the possibility or make myself vulnerable, as it were, to this call for Christian conversion, because I've just done it too many times, and I just can't do it again, says the individual. So, yeah, I mean, we all have experiences of this in various ways. It might be as simple as like, you were up too late last night, and you slept poorly, and maybe you drank too much, and when you wake up, your first thought is, I just want this day to be over, or the only thing that I'm really looking forward to in this day is its end. It's like you just say, this day can't possibly give me anything good. There's no blessing, of a particular sort, as you have described, Father Gregory. It's just something to be endured. It's something to be gotten through, okay? So I think that's one temptation, a pretty stark temptation. On the other hand, there's what I refer to as like fantastical thinking or wishful thinking. This would be the person who says, yeah, like maybe it went X, Y, or Z way previously, but this time it's going to be totally different. Have I adjusted any of my behaviors? Well, no. Have I educated myself or prayed up, in anticipation of? Well, no. Have I address the obstacles or hindrances to that conversion in my life, which inevitably, will take place, provided only that I consent to and cooperate with the grace of God? Well, no, but it'll be totally different. So this is the type of thinking where one is unwilling to actually undertake the conversion as that conversion is meant to unfold. And one just, by the power of positive thinking, imagines that he's going to overcome whatever it is that stands in his way. So I think that, on the one hand, the foreclosed, that is to say, fatalistic or deterministic thinking, you kind of buffer yourself from the possibility of a surprise, or you buffer yourself from the possibility of the intervention of the Most High God. But on the other hand, you're so, open to it in a kind of silly way that you're never actually capable of or never actually competent to, recognize it, genuinely recognize it at its coming, and then receive it. So we want to set aside these two errors. We can refer to the one as despair and the other as presumption. And we want to abide in Christian hope. That is to say, we want to lay hold of the providence of God, or we want to insert ourselves into God's providential plan so that we can actually, observe it. Like, how do you actually describe that? So that we can adopt, or so that we can assume our place within it, and play our part. So I think Christmas is an especially powerful time in which to respond to these types of graces, because the Lord takes our flesh, right? The Lord takes our flesh. So he expresses our solidarity with his solidarity with our sinful flesh, and assuming all of it, except for sin and ignorance, but assuming all of it, such that he might, unite it to his Godhead and work its reconciliation to him in genuine and most excellent fashion. And that is a surprise, right? Like, you've been hearing in the sacred scriptures throughout the course of the liturgical season that people just didn't see it coming, and then it came, which is to say he came. So we hear about it with Zechariah, and we hear about it with Elizabeth, and we hear about it with Joseph, and we hear about it with Mary. It's like the Lord will interpose himself so as to effect this change as he sees fit to do. What we're responsible for is thinking in accord with that, is loving in accord with that. So the Lord, on the one hand, does not permit us to foreclose on the possibility of ongoing conversion, nor does he permit us to be silly about it and like undisciplined or otherwise unserious in our approach to these matters. He wants us to genuinely be attentive so that we can watch for him at his coming, which is like the gospel in the last few weeks of ordinary time and in the first few weeks of Advent. This idea that, the bridegroom cometh, whether in the second or the third or the fourth watch of the night, he comes. And it's for those, who have been left in the household to be attentive to him. So I think that this vision of the end of time and then the Lord's coming challenge us, and it causes us to see like the whole of our life is potentially open to, or at the very least is fodder for, this type of moral transformation. So what does this mean? Well, it means that we cultivate the virtue of hope, which is to say we have to be grounded in the real. All right? So we can't magnify what is like negative, or we can't minimize what is negative. We can't just focus somewhat disingenuously on what we want to focus on. We need to be open to reality in the totality of its factors, says Monsignor Luigi Cisani. So we want to be grounded in the real. And we don't want to indulge in mental gymnastics of whatever sort, right? That's to say, we want to cultivate self-knowledge, but with an eye towards a certain openness, like with an eye towards this surprise which comes in the Lord's timing, in the Lord's providence, so as to liberate us from whatever it is that currently is tripping us up or keeping us from him. So self-knowledge means, one, a recognition of who you are before God in humility. So everything that we have is a gift from God. Every good and perfect gift comes down to us from the Father of lights, says the letter to James, or the letter of James. And then we read in the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, what do you have that you have not received? If therefore you have received it, why do you boast as if it were your own? So there's a sense that we have to recognize our own lives as a gift from God. Okay, so to be knowledgeable of oneself means to be knowledgeable of the gift of God, and then appropriately grateful for it, right? So to render this to God as praise in gratitude. And then to abandon ourselves to it, which is to say to reconcile ourselves to the fact that we are who we are, and not otherwise, but that we remain open to the prospect of healing and of growth and of development in our character, such that the Lord, like the Lord can do with it what he wills. So self-knowledge should never be a kind of occasion of condemnation, in the sense that like you shouldn't define yourself by your weaknesses, all right? But you should define yourself over and against those who would be like, I can be whatever I want. Not everyone's going to be an astronaut, right? Not everyone's going to realize the dreams that he formulates at the age of 6. And yet, right, our lives are good insofar as they are a gift from God and they are called to a particular meaning and purpose. So I'd say, don't define yourself by your weaknesses or your wounds. It's good to be knowledgeable of those things so that you can, surrender them to the Lord and ask him for that healing and that growth, for that moral transformation, whatever surprise lies in store, particular and peculiar graces in the Christmas season, which is effectively, to define yourself by God's mercy. So God's mercy is tailored to or is attuned to your misery, but it's powerful, it's strong to save, and it seeks to ameliorate or to alleviate whatever it is that troubles you at present, not, again, by some magical transformation, but by a real sacramental transformation. And I think that means that we need to be willing, or we need to be open to that prospect. Okay, so like you need to be willing to rearrange the moral furniture of your interior life if God prompts you to do so. This is a silly example, but let's say that, you went away to college and your freshman year, you looked at your room and you're like, how am I going to arrange this? And maybe the first thought was to bunk your beds. And you're like, okay, we're going to bunk our beds. What a gift. And, your bunked bed life is just going along well for the first 2 weeks of school. And then you befriend somebody in the dorm and then you visit his room and it turns out that he has lofted his beds with his roommate. And you're like, holy smokes, you can loft your beds? That's awesome, because then there's like a little cave where you can put your desk, and that's totally incredible. And then you think about your own room, and you're like, Yeah, I suppose I could loft my bed too, but that would involve moving the love seat and then rearranging and then getting that little post thing and then putting the, yeah, it's just probably too much work. And so you content yourself with your less excellent room arrangement, and then you just abide by that less excellent room arrangement until the end of the year. Here's the thing. You can loft your bed. You can loft your bed. By God's grace, you can loft your bed. But it requires of us a kind of real Christian hope with a recognition that if he seeks to do it in my life, it only requires of me consent and cooperation. But that's a real volitional contribution. That's still something. So I think that in this Christmas season and maybe gearing up for your New Year's resolutions, I think this is a grace that God is giving, that God is bestowing, a grace of ongoing conversion, which means interiorizing this call to evangelical perfection in a new and, vigorous way, with a genuine openness to the possibility of a brighter future. Not necessarily that it's going to hold for you a whole boatload of positive emotions. It might still entail quite a few negative emotions, but it can be better, right? It can improve. So, yes, here we are, midway through the journey of our life, trying not to be, on the one hand, fatalistic or deterministic, or on the other hand, fantastical or wishful in our approach, but to be hopeful, to be real, right? To be attentive to it in all of its distressing disguises, but in penetrating to the heart of the matter, which turns out to be wonderful indeed. So, prepare to be surprised, which is to say, be willing to be surprised. That's all I got for you. This is Pints with Aquinas. If you haven't yet, please do subscribe to the channel, push the bell, and get sweet email updates when other things come out. Also, I contribute to a podcast called Godsplaining. And what's going on Godsplaining? Oh, we just had a live splaining, which is to say a live stream about the most recent papal declaration concerning same-sex blessings. So you might check that out for further indications. And then I wrote a book. It's called Prudence, which talks about our engagement with God's providence. It's called Prudence. What is it called? Choose confidently, live boldly, something like that. Whatever it is, you'll find it. And I hope you profit from it. All right, know of my prayers for you. Please pray for me, and I look forward to chatting with you next time on Pints with Aquinas.